And we welcome in on this Monday morning to the Oklahoman's video studio, U.S. Representative Steve Russell. Good to see you, sir.
It's good to see you.
Thank you for your time. How long are you in Oklahoma City this time?
Just unfortunately a couple of days, few days. Never get home as much as I would like to, but it's always nice to be home.
Very good. And then I suppose you'll be back over the Easter break.
I will, and I'm looking forward to that, getting out. And of course, we got a busy day today, and we'll be connecting with constituents and have some office calls. And then we're trying to get out and use the platforms and stuff to update people on what's going on. So we appreciate, I appreciate being able to do this morning.
Well, I know you've made various media rounds in the local media over the past few weeks. We appreciate your time and stopping by here, and I know you have a campaign going on, 5th Congressional District. A few things to chat with you about, maybe NCAA brackets, maybe your Oscar reaction. I'm kidding, mostly there. But some heavier topics,
okay.
Niger, tax reform, North Korea,
Absolutely.
some things to dive into there. Let's start in the West Africa country of Niger. You were there, I believe, the only U.S. congressman to go there.
Now there have been other members that have been, but certainly recently, and I can't imagine that there's been too many people that have gotten out to the remote places where I was able to go.
And I guess we should set this up. 4 American soldiers died back in October. Some more information recently came out. You were there on a fact-finding mission.
Yes, and was able to get out went to northern Cameroon, which is fighting Boko Haram there at the nexus along the Nigerian border and some of that. Got out with SEAL Team 2 and looked at how they are working with some of the anti-terrorist forces, doing great work there. And then also got out and visited one of our Special Ops Air Force squadrons that was in the area, and then went to Niger and spent a bulk of my time there. I got out with a couple of Special Forces teams in remote locations around Arlit and Awalam. It was really interesting. These spaces are just vast.
Is it wide? I mean, this is the Sahara Desert. So
it's the Saharan Desert as it kind of fuses into sub-Saharan, and so northern Niger is literally sand. Okay. And as you move south, it kind of perks up and looks, like maybe Barstow, California, or West Arizona. I mean, it really doesn't get much beyond that. And then when you get down to the rivers, though, in the southwest portion of Niger, it actually, you get some green and some agriculture and some stuff like that. People ask, okay, why are we there? We've been there a long time. We've been there 25 years working with the nation of Niger.
What is our presence there? Several hundred soldiers?
It is. We've got in the region probably 800 to 1,000 that partner with several countries. That sounds like a large figure, but the reality is, we're talking many nations. So this is not a large presence at all. And our special forces, they have worked these missions for a long time. The Hollywood version of our SF, they get out and they're doing all these direct action missions like we see in film or television, but the reality is one of their biggest roles is foreign internal defense, and that's the mission that they've been doing in Niger. And what does that mean? That means they go in and they partner and train specific forces to deal with external threats, in this case transnational terrorists. And they've been very successful in doing this. Like I said, operating for 2.5 decades. This is the first time we've had any Americans that have had any casualties with our operations there. And the Nigerian forces are not only great partners, but they also acquitted themselves very well on this ambush. They didn't drop their rifles and run. They actually stood and fought and mixed their blood with ours. Yeah.
What did you learn?
Well, I learned that the force that was attacked on the 4th of October was not doing anything out of the ordinary. They were patrolling some border towns that belong to the country of Niger, and it was their forces that our special forces advise. They call them partner units. And what I think happened was in recent months you've had some ISIS, Al-Qaeda type affiliates that have come in and infused a little bit of money and leadership into the region. And they were able to gain sufficient numbers in the northeast part of Niger. They were able to roll up a couple of outposts just by sheer numbers. In counter to that, in both Mali with the French and then the French and Nigerian soldiers and then our operations, they kind of ran them out of that area. And what I think happened was that it was a chance contact where these forces, these terrorist groups, they had shifted over to the west. And when they did, they saw a target of opportunity as this patrol was stopped at a village. And they took a risky move and rolled it up, or attempted to, and you had a pretty nasty fight. It was a surprise to the unit that was there, obviously, in ambush. There's not a lot of cover, very little concealment. The guys fought gallantly, and what is amazing is that they all weren't killed. They acquitted themselves very well. And so you'll have people, such as the New York Times and others who, maybe they got the mechanics of the ambush correct, but their context and their conclusions, I believe, were way off base.
In what way? What did you hear when you were speaking to the soldiers there?
Part of the thing that they're trying to conjecture is that the intel kept changing and the mission, went on, and it was somehow mismanaged or handled, and then they got into something that they couldn't handle. That is absolutely false from everything that I've seen. The other thing that you see out there is that they're talking about, well, you had this soldier, David Johnson, the paratrooper, wheeled mechanic, very tough soldier, by the way, but they're trying to portray him as if he were somehow shouldn't have been out there because he was a mechanic and he wasn't properly equipped and all. That's just sheer nonsense. One, he's a paratrooper at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. That's not easy. Two, he was a by name request by this Special Forces team to join them for a second tour. Okay, anyone that's worked with Special Forces knows, they don't ask for people by name and pick who they want as support on their team if they're slack soldiers. That just doesn't happen. And so again, you've got people that maybe they mean well, or maybe they've been watching too many Hollywood films or something, and they're coming up with all of these things. And the sad thing is that it's hurtful. It's hurtful to the families that lost these soldiers. It's hurtful to our policy. It's hurtful to our military, and it's hurtful to our country that they try to make such conjectures. And so I learned as a warrior, ground truth's always closest to the ground. Go out and see it. I went out and I wanted to get out with these teams, and it was exhausting. We went to some very remote locations, and I had invited other members of Congress to go with me. There were no takers, but go figure. But it was great to be out with warriors again, and they opened up to me very well, because once they saw kind of my background and what I was doing, we had some very frank and very good discussions.
Before we move on to North Korea, on this topic, in this case, what happens next?
Well, there will be a report that is with the Secretary of Defense right now. The FBI did a forensics investigation. People say, why would the FBI go? Because they're equipped for that sort of thing. And so they concluded their report. It is now with the Secretary of Defense. He will now dissect the report, brief the families on what happened, and then it will be released to the public. And so with that, I felt it was important that we in Congress, who have an oversight role, we need to get to what the specific things were ourselves, so that as all of this dusts up and people retreat to political corners and trying to make this, some political leverage against the president or whatever, I mean, you know how people will get, that it was important to establish the facts and go see it. And I'm glad I did.
Chatting with U.S. Representative Steve Russell, 5th Congressional District, Oklahoma, here in town for the weekend. Let's shift gears to North Korea. You're a member of the House Armed Services Committee. One of the big stories over the past few days, President Trump saying he would sit down and chat with Kim Jong-un. I believe you have been in the past on the record saying you're in favor of putting pressure, not negotiating. Your thoughts?
Well, you have to apply pressure in order to get to the table. And what is interesting about this is, unlike in the past, where the ask was to get to the table, I'm not suggesting heads of state. It's the first time this has happened between North Korea and the President of the United States. But before, in order to get to the table and have talks, it was, well, okay, if you relieve the pressure, we'll come and talk. We didn't do that this time, which I think was fantastic. We also partnered with everyone in the region, to include China, and I think it's working. So I just got back from an Aspen Institute National Security Conference that was held at Stanford University last weekend. We met with former Secretary of State George Shultz, 97, still sharp as ever.
Good for him.
Yeah. We met with former Defense Secretary William Perry. We met with former U.S. ambassadors to South Korea. We met with nuclear physicists that had been in Pyongyang and examined their sites. We met with members of the South Korean government. We met by video teleconference with members of the Chinese think tanks and military. Really engaged on this issue for an entire weekend. And the good news is we see that the sanctions are paying off, that they're working. And we also see that if we all hold together as a partnership of nations, we can find a diplomatic path to this. And no one wants the military options. There are no good military options. There's no bloody nose strike that's going to be successful. There's no pinpointing or taking out his specific nuclear devices. There's no guarantee you would know where exactly all of them are, perhaps. And so if one is left, then you've got that. And then the conventional response would be devastating. We would prevail, no question in my mind. We would prevail in any of these scenarios, and that Kim Jong-un would be dead and that his government would be destroyed along with much of the country. But you can't have that outcome without the pain and suffering and widespread disaster to South Korea, its economy. You got the two most powerful economies in the United States and China, plus Japan involved. This would be devastating. There's no good military options. So we have to work this issue. We have to work it very hard. And for my part, in my role on the National Oversight Subcommittee of Oversight and Government Reform, and then on the Armed Services Committee, I've been honored to be invited to some of these things, to have discussions. And I've not been shoving my face on television, a lot about this or that. Instead, I've just been quietly working and doing the job, meeting with Chinese officials, meeting with a lot of others, so that we can get to a solution.
I suppose it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to have some negotiations. It's probably another thing for those chairs to be pulled up to the table and negotiations actually happen. That's right.
Some people are like, well, do we really want the president and Kim Jong-un sitting down and all of that? Look, do we really want nuclear war? So let's figure out a way and what would the outcome of these talks be? What it would not be is that North Korea gets to keep plutonium enrichment, hydrogen bomb capable intercontinental ballistic missiles in a future path or even in current. And so that is just not an outcome.
The South Koreans indicated that the North Koreans would stipulate reduction of, and I'm paraphrasing, of some sort of nuclear arsenal. From what you're hearing, do you think that's likely?
I think what we have to do, and here's the good news, there really are some options that we have. Okay, so they have plant, they have enrichment program, they have different things. But you could tackle key development mechanisms and machinery and make those the cost. It's like, okay, you will remove this system, you will deplete this specific function or capability. And if you go after 4 or 5 of those specific things, then they would no longer have the capacity to produce. And so that's how you do it. They have nuclear power plants and all of that. It provides what limited electricity that they possess and some of the other things. So you wouldn't necessarily have to shut down everything, but you could target specific things. And then you have inspectors that go in and ensure and make, and people say, well, okay, so what's the difference between this and Iran, say? Well, for one, we're not sending $400 million on a pallet of cash. Two, we're not doing all of this without government being involved, where it's some deal that's quietly done and somehow is supposed to be binding. There are a lot of differences. And we're not making accommodation and payment to a regime that exports terror. So there are many differences on this, and I think the key to that success is our partnership with China in this whole endeavor. It's vital.
Chatting with U.S. Congressman Steve Russell about a variety of topics. So far we've covered Niger and North Korea. Speaking of President Trump, he recently placed some tariffs on foreign steel and aluminum. Your thoughts on that?
I think most Americans don't mind a targeted tariff towards offenders, where you have people either dumping steel or they're doing things that have been unfair trade practices. I think that there's room for that. In the initial things that the president had talked about, he was 25% steel tariff, 10% aluminum, bam, there it is. A lot of pushback on that from everywhere, to include our people here in Oklahoma. I mean, think about it. The oil and gas industry uses a lot of steel, from the drilling pipe that they put down in the ground, to the bits, to the rigs, to the pipe conveyances, after what's produced, a lot of steel. Our aerospace industry, a lot of aluminum. And then, you get to the other aspects, canneries, sure. Different things, breweries, whatever it might be. People are affected in every aspect, from both entertainment to leisure to all the way to vital and core industries. So we have to look at that to make sure that we're not punishing countries that are trading fairly. The United Kingdom, for example. Countries in Europe, where if we have trade disputes, we got very good legal systems to deal with that. And by the way, the United States has never lost a dispute in the World Trade Organization, ever. Now, sometimes it takes time, and I get that. So I think the president is on the right line of attack about, we're not going to put up with this anymore, but now we got to look, where do we apply that attack? You don't want to attack friendly forces, you want to attack offenders. And I think that we are seeing that shape up here in recent days with the president's policies. Hopefully, we can go after bad actors rather than everybody in some blanket tariff.
As we enter President Trump's second year, are you seeing a leader who perhaps throws out an idea or says something that may be a little bit beyond and then sees the negotiation dial back from that? Is that sort of the deal making?
Well, it's certainly an observation that we see, and I think one of my observations. 25%
sure. on this, but realizing it's probably not going to get that. Or
25% on everybody, and it's like, no, just on you. I think that is part of the way that we see the president operate. In his business background, he'll throw something out there. It's like, all right, here it is. There's no pushback. He's like, well, that's my deal. Where's yours? And then if there's no deal, then he'll either step forward in that space, or he'll just say, fine, you want to make a deal, I'll move on. Well, now applying that to politics, I think he's learning in, how does the system work? Who do you work with? For example, in industry, he could say, fine, you don't want to work with me, I'll move on to somebody else. Well, with Congress, we are the only corporation with which he can work with. I mean, we're it. So you kind of got to work through some of those things. But the executive, as we've seen many presidents, has a lot of authority. And in this case, he can exert things, he can put tariffs, he can do different things. And what we also are seeing is, we're seeing some talk. We're seeing some other people saying, hey, work with us on this and we won't do that. Don't punish us because we're not doing anything wrong. Okay, we're seeing some movement there, but the ones that know they are doing wrong, they better start coming up with something pretty quick, because they're going to be on the receiving end of some punishment.
One final topic for you. Let's chat about tax reform.
Sure.
That was another thing President Trump thrown out there. What are you hearing on where we're at on that and how it affects Oklahomans?
I hear from so many people. I mean, from garage owners that come up and say, you have no idea how this is going to benefit. Still hearing it. Last weekend,
small business owners are saying, Congressman, we like this.
Yes, thank you. Not just business owners, but individuals. I had a guy walk up to me who worked in security, and he said, you tell Nancy thanks for the crumbs. And I said, okay. He said, me and my wife combined got a $658 raise in our monthly income due to tax reform. And he said, I don't even know what to say. He said that has so much fundamentally changed what we're doing. Talked to another lady that she worked part-time, and she was bringing home $152 more per month just in that arrangement of her business and part-time. To her, it was huge. And so, people can call it crumbs, or they can, argue about the policies or whatever, but I think, most of America realizes, hey, you know what? Not only is this working, but it's benefiting them personally, and Lord knows the government wastes so much money. Let's let the average constituent and the average American citizen keep a little more in their pocket, and that's what we're doing.
One final question for you, dovetailing off of that. As you campaign once again for re-election, are you sensing, as you talk to the small business owners and the workers across the state or in your district, any sort of anti-Trump movement or sentiment?
I'm not. In fact, what I'm hearing is, okay, there's probably most of Oklahoma or even most of America that may be confused by his manner, taken aback by it, offended by it, whatever it might be on that scale. But more often than not, you're hearing conservatives, independents, and some Democrats saying, well, I don't like his approach, or I don't like the things he says, but I got to hand it to him. I mean, he's getting stuff done on foreign policy, and we're getting North Korea to the table, and we're, we have defeated ISIS in Syria, and we've stabilized, and Mosul's been retaken, and we got Colombia that's. I mean, they go on and on and on about a restored foreign policy, those that, keep up with it. Others have said, well, I don't know about everybody else, but it sure helped my business, or you got labor unions, labor unions supporting the policies of the president because he's restoring core manufacturing industries and natural resource industries. And so I think most of America is looking at it and going, may not be pretty, but boy, it's working. And I think that's where we see a lot of people right now.
One of the last times we saw you was with the governor, aerospace announcement coming here. Any other companies coming?
Well,
anything else you can tell us about?
I'm always on the scan. In fact, I'll be meeting on my next trip home at the end of this month. We're having a German delegation come in for exactly this reason, to look at how they could expand and how they could do more business in Oklahoma. And we've got some great partnerships already. But gosh, look at our great people, our great workforce, our great engineers. Our low energy prices. There's so many reasons to come to Oklahoma, and we're trying to bring those core jobs. So I will be having a German delegation that will be coming, and we're very much looking forward to meeting with them to introduce them to the real America instead of going, to the left and right coast or whatever it might be. Hey, come to the interior of the country. There's a lot of benefit to doing that. So, and then one caveat too is that with the aerospace companies and others that are coming. It's even better than what we thought. I've gotten some data and some briefings lately that show that there will be a capacity greater in manufacturing due to contracts and different things where we're seeing these aerospace companies benefit right here in Oklahoma. So I say let's keep going. Let's why not? Let's bring that to Oklahoma. People want those anchoring jobs. They don't want something where, okay, yeah, I worked for a contractor for 3 months and then, we lost the contract and then I moved on. People kind of like the idea of being able to work for a company where they got stability. to maybe stay here, live here, raise their families, and enjoy the quality of life that we have in Oklahoma.
U.S. Representative Steve Russell, always appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah.
Will you fill out an NCAA bracket this year?
You know, we do at the office. Yeah, we kind of fill one out, and yeah, I've gotten close a couple of times, but you know, haven't gotten it all the way. I mean, you know, there's always the usual suspects that are always in the top 5, 6 of names, and that'll probably be who I put in there as well.
Well, good luck with the bracket and safe travels.
No,
thank you again for your time.
Appreciate it.